Rockets and Knicks were in Game 5 when O.J. started that fateful drive. His four-way hazard lights were blinking, and no one knew what the Jews was thinking.
I've been to Reno, Chicago, Fargo, Minnesota, Buffalo, Toronto, Winslow, Sarasota, Wichita, Tulsa, Ottawa, Oklahoma, Tampa, Panama, Mattawa, La Paloma, Bangor, Baltimore, Salvador, Amarillo, Tocopilla, Barranquilla, and Padilla. I'm a killer. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the desert bare, man. I breathe the mountain air, man. Of travel I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere.
This is Oversight Live, your advocate for good governance. We're putting the site back in. Oversight. Here's the watcher on the wall, your host, Ben Carpenter.
Good evening, Alaska. This is Ben Carpenter, your host of Oversight Live. Thanks for joining us tonight. Oversight Live is your road to Juneau until one can be built. It is cost prohibitive, both time and money, for Alaskans to get down to Juneau and see what's happening in our legislature. But not having a road is not an excuse, because many of the meetings that go on that you would be privy to if you went down there are available digitally. But my goodness, where to start? There's a lot of meetings, a lot of video to sift through. Well, that's where I come in. Having spent time in the legislature, I bring you what I think is relevant. And if you want to see something, you can request it, and I will do my best to bring it forward. We can watch it together, and you can ask questions. You go to a committee meeting down in Juneau, you won't be able to ask questions. You'll have to sit there quietly. They'll give you your 1 or 2 or maybe 3 minutes if they're feeling generous of give you 3 minutes for your public testimony. And that's it. That's all you get. Well, Oversight Live is here to build community. You and I can sit down and watch what's happening in our legislature, and we can talk about it. I'll share my experience. I'll try to answer your questions. If I don't know the answer, I'm going to go find it, and I'll help you out. We're broadcasting on YouTube, Facebook, and X. And if you just chat in your chat window, I'm going to get that question, and we'll try to answer it live on the air. And if you don't want to send a live question, I understand. You can email. Here's my email address, producer@OversightLive.com. If you're watching the recording, you can send me an email on the recording. If you want to see something or you've got a question, ask, and then I will do my best to answer your question. Might even use your question on air. This is about edifying all of us. And if you've got a question, odds are somebody else has that question as well. So we're going to discuss things and make sure people understand what's going on, because that is how we provide better oversight of our government. It is our government. It requires us to participate and for us to understand what is happening. Sound bites during election season is not a good way to govern. You got to understand what's happening between the election seasons. That way you can make a good decision in November or August, as it were. Anyway, and the chat machine here is just blowing up. We're lots of energy going on right now. If you've been paying attention with the legislature, special session going on. We're kind of getting to the end of the game here for this special session, and the Senate's going to come up short. They're supposed to pass a bill. The House has already passed it, HB 381, and it is being asked by the governor to change the property tax structure, the tax structure for the gas pipeline project, to make it economical. The House has already done their due diligence and passed a bill over to the Senate. The project, the developers, AGDC and Glenfarne, are largely supportive of House Bill 381. But the Senate is telegraphing something completely different. So, what's at stake? What's the risk to Alaska? What could possibly be in the minds of the senators for why they would be balking or holding up or delaying or standing in the way of what most everybody is saying? You've got to adjust your tax structure if you want to make the pipeline project even feasible. So many hurdles. It's challenged financially. All of that is true. One thing that's standing in the way right now is the legislature's action to make the project economical through its tax policy. What's being asked is not anything out of the ordinary with respect to other projects around the world. But you're going to hear something a little different from some senators in the majority in our Senate. Okay. So we're going to jump into, I told you last night that we're going to check in with the Senate Finance Committee conversation that was happening last night, and they were going to continue it today, which they did in their morning meeting. And then they had an afternoon meeting. So we've got some clips we're going to review. There's also a couple news articles that got published this afternoon that are pertinent to this conversation that you need to know about. You may have read them already, but we're going to discuss them just a little bit. Before I do that, I'm going to jump over to our chat audience here, and you guys are lighting it up. Yeah, Craig, I saw the article for the Alaska Story article, and we're going to talk about it a little later. Let's see here. Yep, you guys are all ready to go. All right. Or you can call him when he's out in the garden. Yeah, if you got my number, odds are you might be able to reach me in my greenhouse. Yeah, that's interesting. Just as a teaser here, while I've got everybody's attention, maybe I will I'll pull this up really quickly. We'll do some play before we do some work. How's that? Just let me see if I can share this, and then maybe we can okay. Here's what I've been working on. Oh, now I'm a little nervous. Okay. Here's what we got. Proof of concept. How do you like them sound effects? We got a couple towers here that need to be harvested post haste. Got a little dill. There's some lemon basil. Anyway. Pretty happy about these cucumbers. And here's a tower entirely of tomatoes. Tomatoes are going to sell the whole operation, right? Who doesn't love a fresh tomato? We're in the flowering stage. We'll have tomatoes later this year. And then we got one tower that's waiting for some seeds to be ready to be planted here. All right. So you guys have asked what's going on with the greenhouse. I figured I would show that to you right up front here. Kind of bare my soul just a little bit. That's what is exciting me. Some of what is exciting me when I'm not on the podcast is developing this and learning how to do hydroponics, aeroponics in towers. And it's an operation that's going to work year round. The greenhouse is not a clear walled greenhouse with, either polycarbonate or plastic walls. It is a fully insulated building. And the intention here is to be able to provide a little bit of heat. And I'm using some ground heat with a ground to air heat transfer system, and using a heat pump and a little bit of electricity, maybe some supplement with some heating oil if I need to, and using radiant energy through the very large windows that I have, be able to grow year round on these 10 towers. I can feed my family and maybe a couple other families on this, but the point here is to prove that you can create a system, a system designed for Alaska to be able to grow year round. And if we can do it small scale, then we should be able to do it large scale. And it, I think, gets more cost effective. I sure hope the larger scale that you bring it into. So ultimately, I think that's where we have to head if we want to have fresh produce, and not all produce, because not everything's going to grow in a tower, but you can produce a lot. Now, there's no comparison with quality. There's no comparison for what's coming out of those towers and what you get in the grocery store. Hands down, I'll take put a blind taste test to anybody any day. No comparison whatsoever. You'll go to the grocery store after having some of this and you'll realize, man, we're getting gypped. Literally, we're getting gypped. And it's not anybody's being malicious or nefarious here. It's just by the time our produce travels, is transported from its processing centers down in the lower 48 or in another country and gets to Alaska, it's lost its nutrient value. It's lost its flavor. It's just the way it is. So you want better fruit or better greens, better produce, you got to grow it locally. We need to figure this out and stop accepting that we have to have, because we're Alaskans, we have to have a lesser quality of food. That is dumb. We just need to invest in the right infrastructure to make it happen. And I'm going to lead by example if I have to mortgage the farm to do it. All right. Anyway, that's where we're at. Personally, let's talk about the legislature. Let's make fun of some politicians, shall we? I'm saying that lovingly. Okay. I want to bring this up, and we're talking about Senate Finance from yesterday. This is yesterday's meeting, the end of the meeting yesterday that we did not get to finish with, but pertinent to hear from Glenn Farn on pricing and risk to the state. Okay, so here we go. Without further ado,
let's go. This is Adam Presser from Glen Farn, Alaska. What I'd like to comment on here again is that our commitment to cap the price of gas at $16 is an extraordinary commitment. It locks in the economics of the project at a top end. Pairing that with our support for language that protects utility customers from cost overruns has the ultimate result of putting the risk of this project entirely on the developer. That is a risk that we are willing to wear. That's a risk that we're willing to wear to protect the consumers of Alaska. That's a risk that we're willing to wear because we believe in the project and the project that we've put together and the economics behind it. I think it is, as I said, something you would not find very many developers being willing to do. That's one of the reasons we're unique as a partner to the state of Alaska. I think it's something you wouldn't find in the legislation of very many states that would price the cost of a commodity like this associated with a development project. But nevertheless, as a result of many, many hours with many different stakeholders throughout this process, those are commitments that we're willing to make.
And the $16 number, is that a fixed number or is that inflation proofed as well?
That is a number that is tied to inflation, and that is correlated with the price of gas that would be sold to NSTAR and other regulated customers that would also fluctuate with inflation.
Okay, so we're hearing $16. That's it. Not the cost of the project doesn't affect the cost of the gas. Inflation affects the cost of gas, as we're learning, and I don't know what that relationship is because this is the first time that I've heard that there's an inflation figure baked in here, so that as time goes by and inflation happens, the $16 is able to expand. I did know that, but that's that's what happens with inflation. So you want to solve that problem. You got to stop electing politicians in Washington, D.C. who want to keep spending in debt, not balancing the budget. You got to have a balanced budget. You got to stop going into debt to pay for your country's daily expenses if you want to control inflation and have lower costs, because inflation's robbing you of your money. Okay, so that's important. Everybody needs to have a stake in this. All right. So again, to reiterate, $16 is the current contract that NSTAR and Glenfarne are publicly acknowledging that this is what they're working on. Okay, $16 is the last purchased gas from Hillcorp to make sure that we had enough gas this last winter to not freeze. 16 is less than, per Glenfarne's testimony, is less than what it costs to import LNG. Now, I think that the number, talking with folks, I think the number to import it is somewhere around 17. Okay, so marginally lower than what it is to import, but still lower than what it is to import. So out of the alternatives that we have, the only one out of all of the alternatives for natural gas, from Cook Inlet, import LNG, or take it off the North Slope through this project, the only one that has an opportunity for prices to come down is this project through an export terminal. And we've already, if you've been paying attention to this show, we've already detailed how that cost, because you don't have to pay for the transportation to overseas, and you don't have to pay for the liquefaction. That cost, once you start exporting, you benefit from that lower cost, and it drops it to somewhere around $5 for us, for NSTAR and our utilities. Okay, and that's baked into this project, or not to the project. It is baked into the contracts that are being written right now, so that when the price drops because of the export facility comes online, the price locally for us will come down. If the project continues to increase in cost, the size of the project, cost of the project, that does not affect the $16. It doesn't affect the $5. The price of the gas to us is not connected in any way to the cost of the project. That's important because we're going to hear from senators who want to protect Alaska from this project. Okay? All right. That's that. Let's catch the next clip here. Okay, so this is from this morning's meeting. Same people briefing the same committee, Senate Finance.
To clarify a few things. One is, what happens if we don't go to FID? Because we've received this question a number of times, and I wanted to have Adam up here, or Mr. Prestige, on the record so that we could explain what happens. Is the developer under our contracts between AGDC and Glenfarne, developer Glenfarne, they have to continue diligent development efforts until they achieve an FID. And we have laid out sort of 10 criteria of what it means to, commit to, or to undertake diligent development efforts. And what diligent development efforts ultimately requires is a lot of money for them to continue spending. So they have to keep spending money to advance this project until we get to an FID or until they call mercy on that. And if and when that happens, and hopefully it does not happen, but if and when that happens, there is no payment obligation of the state back to Glenfarne. There is no payment obligation under that circumstance. And Adam, if you'd like to add
Sure.
on to that.
Adam Prestidge for the record. Agree with what Mr. Kishinger has said. Glenfarne is developing the Alaska LNG project at our own risk and at our own expense. There's no request for the state to continue to put in additional development cash. And there is certainly no right or expectation for Glenfarne to be reimbursed for any of our development expenses by the state. And I agree very, very much that if Glenfarne were to find that the project had failed or we were unable to be successful and we abandoned the project, again, we don't see that happening because we're confident in the project. But if that ever did happen, Glenfarne would have no recourse, no ability or expectation or request to be reimbursed. We're doing this at our own risk. To underscore that, the proof of that, when Glenfarne was negotiating to come in to take on this project, there was a concept on the table that was an ADA backstop. And it was being considered a bit by the legislature. There was a bit of press about it where the concept was that ADA would provide a reimbursable or a reimbursement guarantee of up to $50 million to cover the costs of engineering studies on the pipeline, with the concept being that if the engineering studies resulted in an unviable project or the project failed to go forward, then that up to $50 million could be reimbursed by ADA, by the state, to the developer. We took a look at that and we thought that that didn't align with the way that we want to take on this project, where we don't have an expectation or a request from the state. The reason for that is that we're confident in this project. We also know that the state's put a lot into it. We're not asking for more. We're asking for the opportunity to be able to take it on ourselves and bear that risk ourselves. And so at that time, we made the decision not to pursue that. We asked ADA to stand down, and we've continued to fund. We've paid for the engineering study. It was successful. We've continued to fund all of the expenses of developing this project ourselves.
So what we have heard on this show numerous times, and what the Mr. Prestidge here, Adam Prestidge, is communicating to us and to the legislature again, is that the cost of the project is like they're bearing the cost. There is not a request or a gotcha or another thing that's going to happen where the state of Alaska is on the hook for more money. If you pass the tax bill and the project moves forward, you can voluntarily choose to invest in the project, but you don't have to. If the project fails and doesn't move forward, even if you pass the tax bill and it doesn't move forward, you're not on the hook for any more money, Alaska. That's the way this project is designed. Now, I was in the legislature when we were having the conversation about that last ADA backstop and $50 million. That was not a cost that the state was going to have to pay. It was only a cost that the state would pay, or that ADA would pay, state really, if the project didn't go to FID. So it was to incentivize somebody to come in and take over this project and try to move it forward. Share the burden of that feed cost, which was estimated to be somewhere around $150 million, not of state money, of private money. This is Glenfarne's money that they had to spend to get the feed done. And they've done one portion of that feed, front-end engineering and design. That's done for the phase 1 only. You still have phase 2. So basically think of it as the pipeline feed is done, but the feed for front-end engineering design for the LNG import facility and liquefaction facility in Nikiski. I said export facility, which is also going to be an import facility in the short term. The liquefaction facility and the facility on the North Slope, the front-end engineering and design has not been done yet. If we can get the approval, we can get final investment decision for phase 1 for the pipeline, those will come later, because the project's economics with having gas available to Tidewater is going to result in a export facility. Having so much gas available, it it's too tempting. There's too much at stake economically for them not to sell the gas. Okay. So state not on the hook financially. We finally reached a point where we've got a partner that is saying we don't need any more money from you, Alaska. We can take it from here. What we need is a good partner in return. Help us with this project and make it economical from a tax perspective. Okay, let's jump to the next.
So under that scenario, unless the legislature decides to take the investment option, there is no scenario that Glenfarne sees that under any scenario that there would be a cash call by the state of Alaska or by Glenfarne.
Chair Hoffman, that is 100% true and correct. There is no scenario where we will ask the state for money. Even the state investment option is an option to the state that doesn't come with a formal request or pressure from Glenfarne to make that investment option. That is the state's decision.
And Mr. Kissinger, would you agree with that statement?
Chair Hoffman, yes, I agree with that statement 100%.
It can't get any more simple than that, right? So here's the dilemma, folks. If you give a tax cut, this is what they're calling it, a tax cut. This is such baited language, right? If you reform your tax policy, if you change your tax policy to accommodate this project, right? Because the tax policy that we have in place was never designed, it was never written for a project of this scale, of this scope. It was never designed for it. So decades later, we're now at a point where we have to work with the existing law, and it doesn't match the needs for today. So you can call it a tax cut, but that's political rhetoric. What you're doing is designing or redesigning your tax policy to fit today's needs. If you feel like this project is too expensive and you feel like you can't trust Glenfarne and you feel like they're going to fall flat on their face, and you can find a dozen reasons for why the project is never going to happen, and this legislature shouldn't be spending money in a special session to consider doing anything because the project's just never going to happen. It's just too big. There's too many hurdles. There's so many reasons why it can't happen, right? If you're in that camp and you've already made up your mind, then passing the bill and lowering the tax costs us nothing. There is zero risk to the state because if the project never happens, the tax is never applied. The changes in the statute are never applied to the project. You can put a sunset date in it. I think there is a sunset date in it. I know there's a sunset date in it. If the project never gets built, it reverts back to the current statute. So there's no cost to the state. There's no risk to the state if the project never gets built. So if you're in this category that says, well, the project's never going to build, it's too expensive, you're doing it wrong, you're small fry, we need a better company, we don't trust you, whatever your justification is, you can point to the tax, the reform of the tax policy, and you can say, well, you know what, if I pass it and they don't build the project, no harm, no foul. There's absolutely nothing that it's going to cost the state because the project never gets built. You never generate any revenue. You don't lose anything because you gave a tax break. There's nothing there. It's a big nothing burger. There's no risk. Now, if you don't want to pass the bill and the project doesn't move forward because it's not economical, then you're going to get the blame for that. It's going to be because you didn't want to change your policy. The project can't move forward. there is risk in doing nothing. Zero risk in doing this. If the pipeline gets built, all of the revenue that comes from that point on is positive because you don't have it now. You don't have a way to get it under current tax law. Somebody else would have to build a different pipeline, have a different project, and figure out a way to do it economical. We've been trying to do this for decades under current law. So somebody else would have to come in and say, oh yeah, we want to do it under current law. You don't have that. So Glenfarne can see their way out, and then somebody else would have to choose to come in and work with the legislature. As crazy as that would be. The reality is the current law is you're never going to have a pipeline built under the current law. The tax structure that is there is overly burdensome to this project, and it has to be modified. It has to be changed. The risk of doing nothing is great because you don't have another source of low-cost energy permitted. This is the only project this decade that has any hope of getting built, and it's permitted, it's ready to go. We just need to adjust our tax structure. All of the other things need to get lined up, and if they don't, oh well, no harm, no foul. But if they do, then we've got a project that moves forward with hope of long-term gas from the North Slope. You want to do nothing? The cost, the risk there and the cost of doing nothing means you're going to have high-cost gas and high-cost energy until you figure out some other project to lower your cost of energy. That's where you're at. Okay. Let's move to this clip, which is later on in the meeting this afternoon. Or this morning, sorry. Got to make it big for you because you can't see that. And here we go.
Sunset provisions are contained through a web of sections 21, 23, 26, 32, and 34. And these are, a lot of them are quite technical, but they really point to the Commissioner of Revenue making the determination that Glenfarne have first met the requirements and so are subject to the AVT, and then later these sunset through these provisions. And they sunset on January 1st, 2060. I'd like to invite Mr. Prestige to explain the requirement for that date, which I believe we'll talk more in later today.
Sure. This is Adam Prestige for the record. There have been a lot of questions about why this would need to be such a long effectiveness on this tax arrangement. And the reason for that is that this project is structured under project finance, where the construction of the project is being financed through loans and investments, but primarily through loans from institutions that would be repaid over a 30-year period of time. And so an effort to keep the cost of the project lower and to keep the cost of gas lower is to spread the debt payments over a longer period of time. That's why we've ended up with a 30-year loan. If you're looking at the life of the 30-year loan, any lender or investor is going to look at the economics of that of the project on that 30-year forecast, and can the project handle its debt service payment, its debt payments over that period of time. And so having the tax reduction apply for that time, that equal amount of time to the loan, is very critical for the economic viability of the project. I've heard it quite a few times that Gaffney Klein has made comments about a 10-year abatement in comparison, and even going so far as to say that he thinks that Gaffney Klein's opinion is that the project only needs a 10-year abatement. That's factually not correct. The Department of Revenue has a financial model that would back that up. If there were to be a shorter term abatement that then ended and reverted back to 20 mils, it would severely challenge the economics of the project, and lenders and investors would simply look at that 30-year forecast. They would calculate the tax reduction during that short period of time, and then the financial burden on the project if the tax were returned up to 20 mils. And as I said, that really makes the project that really challenges the project's viability. one question to that would be, well, how about we just put on a short-term abatement, and then sometime during that period of years, we come up with an adjustment to the mill rate so there isn't a 20 mills at the end of that abatement period. But unfortunately, that doesn't work for providing certainty up front to the lenders and investors who will fund construction. And so when the financing sources are looking to put money in to pay for the construction of the project, they're going to be taking the most conservative forecast of the cost of the project and the financial burdens on the project. And so if there's any possibility that after a period of time, the tax rate would revert back to 20 mills, that's what lenders and investors would assume will happen, because they'll take the most conservative view. And so that's the reason why the 2060 date is so important. The 2060 is a timeline that sets out a few years for construction period, followed by 30 years of operations and 30 years of debt service payment.
Yeah, we can relate to this as homeowners, can we not? You go in to purchase a home, and the bank financer says, hey, yeah, sure, we'll give you a loan for the house. We see how much money you make. We expect you're going to make more money into the future. We'll take the risk on the fact that you might accrue more debt and not be able to afford the mortgage payment. We'll take that risk. But we're going to set this up as a 5% interest rate. Ah, great. We'll get into that. We can afford that payment. And then 15 years later, that interest rate is going to go to 10%. Because that's really where we want to be. That's really where we want to be in 15 years, 20 years. Okay. Will you be able to keep up? Will your income be able to keep up with that change in structure, change in loan structure in 10, 15 years? Well, you might say today, I don't even plan to stay in my house 10 years. So I don't care. I will have sold it. The loan will have been bought out by somebody else, and it doesn't matter. Some people have gotten themselves in trouble with this, with adjustable rate mortgages and balloon payments into the future, right? This is not something that we are not familiar with or shouldn't be familiar with as homeowners. It's a similar concept of what he's talking about. Is the investors in the project don't want to come into the project if they know that in 10 or 15 years, the legislature is going to change the tax and it's going to be larger, because then the economics that we're working at the beginning of the project don't work for the future project. Even a inflation adjustment to your costs is something that's predictable going into the future. And so you can put your plan together knowing that you've got this growth that has to happen, right? You can plan for it. A jump 10, 15 years that's harder to plan for. It's higher risk. So we can understand that. We would not knowingly go into a home loan that we want for 20 years, a 30-year mortgage. Halfway through it, our payment goes up. We would not do that. That is not something that we would do. Why would we be asking Glenfarne to do the same thing for this project? Why would we expect that? It makes no sense. Makes no sense. But we've got some legislators who aren't thinking sensically. Nonsensically is how they're thinking, right? To them, it makes sense because all they're thinking about is revenue. How much money can I get? That greedy company, they're going to be making profits. We'll just up the taxes. You're missing the point of the whole, how do you build a pipeline? Because Glenfarne isn't building it with their reserves, with their money. They're going out and financing it. Just like anybody that would build a pipeline would have to do. So, legislators, you've got to think of the whole picture, not just how much money can we get. Okay, so we've heard how the state is not at risk here. Okay, we're not at risk with regard to pricing. We're not at risk of having to be asked to have more money. What the project is at risk at is the legislature acting in some manner where it changes the game halfway changes the rules of the game halfway through the game, right? Changes your mortgage halfway through the payment period. Okay, I want to jump over to a different topic now. Same topic, different structure here. Okay. Here's what we're going to share. This is an article. This is an article out of the Alaska Beacon. The person that you saw in the video that was sitting behind the speakers was James Brooks, and he writes for the Beacon. Okay. This is an important conversation. So we're going to use James Brooks's work here. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger for you to read it. That way you don't have to go pull it up on your own computer. And make my face smaller because this is what you really need to see. Okay. So I'm going to read. You can read along. Members of Alaska's Senate Majority Coalition. Important for you to understand. Majority Coalition is not all senators. It is the coalition between a few Republicans and all of the Democrats. Said on Tuesday that a tax break for the proposed Trans-Alaska Natural Gas Pipeline, in other words, a tax reform, currently lacks the votes to advance in the Senate. That's key. Currently lacks the votes. Okay. Which votes? Who is not wanting to vote in support? You don't know. You're not allowed to know. Because lawmakers are meeting in a special session that ends on Friday. Even a short delay could kill the bill containing the tax break or tax reform. Governor Dunleavy could also call legislators back into another special session on the issue, and I understand there is a paper in his hand waiting. It's inevitable at this point. There will be a second special session. The Senate is led by a 14-person coalition of Republicans and Democrats. And that makes it sound like that's good. It's the way it's supposed to be. There is 4 or 5 Republicans and the rest of them are Democrats. An internal rule. Love these internal rules. Got to have rule of law and order in our caucuses, right? An internal rule states that 11 of the coalition's members must agree before a bill comes to the floor. We're not to the point of having 11 votes to get to the floor yet, said Democrat Senator Jesse Keel, also a member on finance, if you remember, Senate Finance. Okay, really, really interesting point. Who is it that is part of the 11 that is holding up the show and doesn't want? Wouldn't that be important to you if you're providing oversight of the legislature? Who is it? On Tuesday evening, members of the Senate Majority Coalition met behind closed doors to discuss their next steps. Senate President, Republican Gary Stevens, part of the majority, part of putting the Democrats in charge of this, said that while some members of this majority are willing to support the bill as currently written, others are asking for significant amendments. That's not necessarily the members on finance. That are the members of the coalition. Okay. You have to remember that the Republicans in the Senate outnumber the Democrats, but you've got a handful of Republicans that would rather work with the Democrats in this coalition. So the 11 members is not your Republican 11 members of the Senate. It is a mix of Democrats and a couple Republicans. And those 11 are calling the shots. You could have all Republicans calling the shots as to whether the bill comes forward or not, but you don't, because there are people that decided to go work with Democrats instead of work with Republicans. Okay? This is how it works. You can poo-poo parties all you want. The parties have nothing to do with this. This is just labels on people that are sitting in Senate seats. They are ideologically aligned. The Republicans that are working with the Democrats, I don't know what to tell you. They don't believe Republican things. Maybe that helps them get elected in their district. Senator Democrat Bill Wielechowski. We're familiar with him, are we not? And a noted critic of the bill. It's interesting that he would say that the author of this piece would say he's a noted critic of the bill, because don't you remember some of the very first meetings? Senator Wielechowski was saying, we want to have a gas line. We want to have a gas line. Evidently now we don't want to have a gas line. He's changed his mind, or he was lying at the beginning, one of the two. So he's a critic of the bill. He's said that he sees several points of contention, including basic things like the length and size of the proposed tax break. Again, no tax break, no pipeline, no revenue. You do a tax reform, call it a tax break if you have to. Now you might have a project and you might have revenue. Senate Finance Committee, which is hearing the bill, could amend it or win over some reluctant senators, but that runs the risk of making the bill unacceptable to Glenfarne, the pipeline project's lead developer. Glenfarne officials have said that a tax break is necessary for it to obtain the financing for the project that it publicly expects to cost as much as $54 billion. Could cost 60. It doesn't matter. That price tag is irrelevant. On Friday, that Alaska House voted 34-5 to replace the state's 2% petroleum property tax for 30 years with a smaller tax on gas sent through the pipeline. Speaking to the Senate Finance Committee on Tuesday morning, Glenfarne, Alaska President Adam Prestage warned senators to not shorten the terms of the tax break. And we just heard this. If there were to be a shorter term abatement that then ended and reverted back to 20 mils, it would severely challenge the economics of the project, meaning the investors are not going to invest. Under current laws, according to an analysis by the Alaska Department of Revenue, the state of Alaska would net, and get this, okay? Here's the argument. This is what we're going to lose. The state of Alaska stands to make $29.7 billion through 2062 if the pipeline was built as planned under current law. All right? Under current law, we could get $29.7 billion through 2062. Boroughs would get $17 billion. Under the House passed bill, and the bill that the project sponsor agrees to, the state's take drops to $23 billion. So instead of getting $29 billion, the state gets $23 billion. And that's not good enough for Wielechowski. He has a problem with the length and the size of the proposed tax break. He didn't say anything about the cost of energy to you. He's saying that the drop, that making $23 billion is not enough. We need to make closer to $29 billion. No project, $0 billion. This project under this bill, $23 billion. That's the math that Alaskans need to understand. No project, no $29 billion. A project with this under this bill, $23 billion. What does it mean for your municipalities? Well, your boroughs would share another $17 billion under current law for a project that'll never get built, or they see a decline. The boroughs share drops to $7.5 billion. So the boroughs are going to get $7.5 billion instead of zero under current law, but they think they would have gotten 17. If you could find somebody to build the pipeline under current law, you could get 17. But that project doesn't exist. So this is what we're squabbling over. Changing the tax law to enable us to get $23 billion at the state and $7.5 billion at the local level. That's not good enough. Plus, we, Alaskans, get the assurance of having gas off the North Slope for decades. And once it gets exported, we have the lowest cost gas in the nation. Right now, the lowest cost gas is around $8. This would make Alaska the lowest cost gas, which is dang near where we think where we were expecting to get gas. Like, we're pumping it out of the ground here. Why is it so doggone expensive? It's about time Alaskans benefit from the resources in the state, not just the state government through taxes. The oil that we're pumping out of the ground, the state government is benefiting from that. What do you benefit? What do you benefit from the oil that gets pumped off the North Slope? Some of that oil comes to Nikiski and it gets refined in the Marathon refinery right down the road from me. I step out and I can hear the refinery. That refined product goes to Anchorage International and it services planes. So when you get on a plane and you fly out, you're benefiting from that oil coming off the North Slope. Some of that refined product goes into your gasoline. So when you drive your car, you're benefiting. Some of that product goes into the asphalt that they build the roads with. So if you're driving on the roads, you're benefiting from the oil that comes down. The more expensive the state makes the oil, the more expensive your gasoline, your jet fuel, your asphalt. Having gas come off the North Slope, what are you going to benefit? You're going to benefit in lower cost energy. That should be a primary driver for the legislature. But what you're seeing here, written in the article, and what we're witnessing on committee meetings, is a legislator, is individuals that we have elected that they have their blinders on, and all they can see is that all they can see is this number, the difference between 29.7 and 17. I'm sorry, 29.7 and 23.4. The author of the article wants to make it very clear here that boroughs, you better watch out because you're going to lose $9.8 billion if they pass this bill. You're going to lose it. Your revenue drops. Your revenue drops to $7.5 billion, but it's a drop of $9.8 billion, almost $10 billion. You're going to lose $10 billion if these legislators have their way and they pass this tax break. This is a lie because the project is never going to go forward under the current law. So it really is a loss of zero. You get to make $7.5 billion. Do you have a project in line? Any of the boroughs that are listening to this program, do you have another project? Do you have another hope right now in the next decade of being able to share $7.5 billion with the other boroughs in this state? Is there another project that I'm unaware of that is a possibility right now? There's probably lots of good ideas out there, but are they permitted? Are you going to care if you get to share in $7.5 billion? Are you really going to care that you didn't get $17.3 billion? This number is a red herring. You would be better off to just ignore it because it doesn't exist. It is. It represents a tax cost 10 times greater than any of the other recently permitted projects for LNG facilities and pipelines. It is not reasonable for gas pipelines. It obviously is working for oil pipelines, but it's not reasonable for gas pipelines. They are completely different commodity, priced differently, used differently, have different customers. So you cannot use the statute that applies to oil and gas pipelines for this pipeline. It does not work. That number is irrelevant. This number is relevant. Do you want $7.5 billion? Do you want a portion of that to be coming to your borough? If the answer is yes, then the bill needs to be passed. If you want to see $23.4 billion come to the state budget over the next several decades, then you pass the bill, some version of it. That's your choice. That's what the choice is for the legislature. Being fixated on what you could get if the project were different, if conditions were, it's a fool's errand. You're being fooled. You're fooling yourself is what it is. Okay. Back to the 11. Stevens said he doesn't expect the bill to advance from the Senate Finance Committee to a vote of the full Senate before noon Thursday. Okay, so this is not saying it's not going to advance out of finance. It just says there's a delay. And Thursday is the day. Why is it Thursday? Have we heard? Why is it Thursday? I mean, we've been asking a whole bunch of questions. Why Thursday? We're going to get there. Ooh, that's a big word. I'm pentultimate. I'd have to look that up. Is there a way to look this up here? Yeah, I could. Anyway, that's an important day of the special session. I don't know that word off the top of my head. Pentultimate. Ultimate day. I don't know. You got to write for like a 4th grade level there, James Brooks. On Tuesday evening, the committee scheduled a hearing for Thursday afternoon. Senate Finance Co-Chair Lyman Hoffman, Democrat, said noon Thursday is probably the earliest time the bill could advance from Finance Committee to the full Senate. So it's going to advance from Senate. That's what this is telegraphing. It's going to get out of Senate. Okay. None of the senators on finance want to be responsible for stopping the bill. Don't want to be responsible for killing the pipeline. Get that? That's important to understand. It is absolutely going to get out of finance, because if it doesn't, that narrows 60 legislators responsible for a bill, or a majority of 60. That's in the House and the Senate. It narrows it down to the handful that exist on Senate Finance. They're the ones that are responsible for not moving the bill forward. They do not want that responsibility. So they are most certainly going to move it out of finance. There's too many people looking at what's happening. And they have cover. What kind of cover do you mean? This is a challenging timeline, said Democrat Senate Forrest Dunbar from Anchorage, because lawmakers outside the Finance Committee can't begin writing proposed amendments until they see what the Finance Committee does with the bill, says the member of Resources that amended the heck out of it when the bill was in Senate Resources. He's had every opportunity to amend the bill. Well, I'm sorry. They amended a different bill. He did not have the opportunity to amend House Bill 381. I stand corrected. So he'll offer his amendments that he did in Senate Resource. All right. We'll talk about gravel. We will talk about gravel on the Senate floor. Dunbar said he doesn't think the bill does enough to guarantee that the state's oil revenue, the number 2 source of general purpose money for services on the north, and permanent fund dividend, would be held harmless if the pipeline is built. We have already heard testimony to counter that. That is nonsense. I think the current version, matter of fact, our own DNR is telling us that the removal of gas is going to increase oil production. And that means oil taxes to the state would increase. I think the current version of the bill does not protect Alaska's financial interests enough to get to the floor, he said. What? Oh, one of those other Republicans that enabled the Democrats, Senator Bjorkman, is a member of the majority and generally supports the House-passed bill, but thinks it needs some technical changes. So even he wants to amend it. He's not certain whether the majority will hold to the 11-vote rule. Oh, really? What does that mean? Okay, so let's talk about the 11-vote rule. If the 11-vote rule becomes a permanent obstacle, legislators who support the tax break could try to bring the bill to the floor for a vote with procedural motions. That would involve members of the majority cooperating with the 6 Republicans of the Senate's all-Republican minority coalition. Minority coalition? There's no coalition. It's all Republicans. It's just a Republican minority. This legitimizes, using the word here, legitimizes the word, the concept of coalition. He's trying to legitimize it. You got a coalition in the majority, you got a coalition in the minority. It's a legitimate way to do things. Okay, when your gas bill and your electric bill continue to climb, you can point to the word coalition and say, I sure am glad we have one of those in the legislature. This what is being detailed here. Let me finish this. If the bill advances to the floor and all 6 minority senators vote for the bill, only 5 majority senators would need to vote for it in order for it to pass. Okay, so this is the key. This is what people need to understand: is that the Senate could have organized, and we could have avoided all of this drama and this delay and this conversation. We could have totally avoided it if these members, all 6 minority senators and 5 majority senators, had to work together. Those are Republicans. If those people had have worked together and chose to caucus together, to have their own coalition, a Republican coalition together, call it whatever you want, we wouldn't have this problem. But you've got majority members who didn't want to work with the minority members. So they joined with the Democrats. Why? Because they wanted a defined benefit bill to pass. That's why. A lot of good it did them. You can point to that. You can point to those few Republicans who, like this Bjorkman, right? My senator. Oh, I support the bill. I want to see it amended. And I'm also part of the majority. I don't want to work with the Republicans. So I'm responsible for the Democrats calling the shots here and holding the things up. He's responsible just as much as the other handful of Republicans that are working with the Democrats. They're responsible. Don't blame the Democrats. That's what they do. Put the blame where the blame belongs. It's on that handful of Republicans who made this decision 2 years ago. Dunbar cautions against that kind of maneuver. He's talking about the Republicans working together. It could harm relationships between senators. It would make organizing another bipartisan majority less likely next year. Says the member of the Democrat coalition, the Democrat who doesn't have enough to make a majority. There aren't enough Democrats elected to be in the majority. They require Republicans to enable them. And so he's saying to the public, well, you better not do that. You better not work together as Republicans, because that would make it hard for us to work together, Democrat and Republican, next year. Like, you're holding up the bill and you're holding up the project, and you are the reason why we're going to have high cost energy. And you're admonishing us to not work together? Governor Mike Dunleavy has previously expressed support for Glenfarne's positions. Thursday is the deadline for the governor to decide whether or not to veto several bills associated with the pipeline project. I'm sorry, I misread that. Maybe that was fortuitous. Let me back up. Thursday is the deadline for the governor to decide whether or not to veto several bills unassociated with the pipeline project. What did we have a conversation with before the special session, the end of the regular session, and what was potential to happen to get a gas line bill through in the regular session? Why was Senate Resources dragging their feet? Because there was a deal trying to be struck between defined benefits and the gas line bill. Here, you've got a similar tactic being used. We sent you a bunch of bills, Governor, and we don't want you to veto them. So we're going to sit here and we're going to threaten to do nothing with the gas line bill that you want until we are sure that you're going to allow our bills to go through. This is extortion, but it's not the governor that's being extorted. It is Alaskans who are being extorted. It is your energy prices that these Democrats and Republicans in the Senate are holding up as hostage. They're holding you hostage, Alaskans. They're saying that governor, he better not do what the Constitution allows him to do. He better just let that stuff go. Otherwise, we're not going to pass this bill. That is literally what they're saying. You know what? There's a remedy for this. The process that we have in place in the legislature allows the governor to veto the bills. And the legislature can come back and say, you know what, governor, we don't care about your vetoes. We can override your vetoes. And we've got enough members of the body. We believe we passed the bill. We must have enough. So we're going to override your veto. That's how the process works. That's the way it should work. These 11 that are hiding behind their coalition, they don't want to have a vote to show who's not supporting this bill, are the same people that don't want to see the governor engage in this process. They don't want it to come back for an override vote because they may not have the votes for it. So they want to force the governor to not veto things, to manipulate the system that is existing, that is the process by which we govern. If they can't win on their ideas, they win by manipulating the system. And this is what we have to battle every single year in the legislature. This is why we no longer pass education budgets in the first couple months of the year. This is why the education funding conversation gets tied up in the budget battle and it goes to the very last day of the session because they use time compression as a weapon. They put the bill to the very last until there's no other options, and then people they're wanting to go home and they have to pass the bill. This is manipulating the system, and they're continuing to do it in broad daylight, brazen. How brazen is it, Ben? That's a pretty strong word. Senate President Republican declined to answer questions asking whether the governor's actions on those bills could affect the majority's decision on the pipeline project. Quote from Stevens: hopefully the governor's getting the message that we want to see very few vetoes. Hopefully the governor's getting the message, wink, wink. We want to see very few vetoes. Leaders of the House and Senate are tentatively planning a joint session on Friday morning to take up any veto overrides that lawmakers want to bring forward. Then what is the problem? If you're going to override the governor, then let's get it over. Let's get it over with. Senator Kawasaki from Fairbanks, and a supporter of the pipeline. Did you get the feeling that he was a supporter of the pipeline from his time in Senate Resources? He has a really funny way of showing his support for the pipeline. He said no senator is explicitly saying that they will vote for the pipeline tax break if the governor allows their other bills to become law. We're not saying that. Stevens says, hopefully the governor's getting the message that we want to see very few vetoes. But Kawasaki says no senators explicitly saying that they will vote for the pipeline bill if the governor allows other bills to become law. Still, there's an implication in the Senate's actions. Folks need to realize that if you want goodwill, you don't veto everything that's on the governor's desk, says Kawasaki. He just said no senators explicitly saying that they will vote for the pipeline bill if the governor allows their bills to become law. And then he says, you don't veto everything on the governor's desk if you want goodwill. Folks, that's what you call a liar. That's a liar with a silver tongue. He's so good at it, he doesn't even notice. That's a liar. He's a liar. So why is the Senate balking right now at this bill, the tax line bill? Why are they holding your energy prices hostage? so that there's a handful, dozen of bills that have gotten, maybe it's more than a dozen bills that have gotten sent to the governor's desk so that they don't get vetoed and they don't have to go through a veto override, because the veto override is a threshold that they may not have the votes for. That whole bipartisan coalition thing that they got going, it's not working to override a veto. That's the way the system's supposed to work. It isn't just 21 and 11. To get a law passed, we think it's 21 and 11. That's just a majority of the legislature. But the governor's got to say too. Eek. If he doesn't like it, that's the constitutional. This isn't a direct democracy. The people don't get to say. The governor, our elected representatives get to say. And the system that we've got set up means the governor gets a veto. If you don't like it, if you don't like his veto, then override his veto. And if you don't have the votes, then you got to make better arguments. But if you think you're going to hold up reducing Alaskans' energy prices in order to force the governor to not veto bills, you got another thing coming, not with the governor, with the people of Alaska. We sent you there to give a fair shake at every project and every law that comes through. You're not giving a fair shake at the gas line bill. You're holding it hostage, and you're holding Alaskans hostage to ensure the governor doesn't put you in a place where you have to override his veto. You've got the process and the authority to override his veto, so exercise. You're planning to exercise it. Why does dealing with the gas line bill have anything to do with that? Because you're willing to manipulate others in order to get what you want. Do I need to say that in a softer tone? Do I need to have a smile on my face and talk like I'm talking to toddlers? Hey guys, if you're willing to manipulate others, that's probably the wrong thing to do. Alaska story. Suzanne Downing's got a article here that's worth bringing up here. Suzanne writes, if the Alaska LNG project, and you can't see that, let me make that a little bigger for you. Not that big. If the Alaska LNG project dies in the Alaska State Senate this week, don't expect the people responsible to stand on the Senate floor and explain why. You don't get to provide oversight because you're not going to know. That's because the bipartisan Senate majority has a convenient escape hatch known as the Rule of 11. It's not in law, not in state law. It's not in the uniform rules. It's not even official Senate rule. It's a private caucus agreement. Under this arrangement, no major legislation moves in the Senate unless at least 11 members of the majority caucus agree behind closed doors to advance it. Again, this is the cost of Republicans choosing not to work with Republicans and working with Democrats, is the Democrats now get a say on what comes through the Senate. If they don't reach that number of 11, the bill never sees daylight. It simply disappears. And that appears to be exactly what's happening to Governor Dunleavy's special session gas line legislation. Governor called lawmakers back to Juneau for one purpose: remove tax obstacles that could undermine the financing of this project. The House did its job, passed the legislation. Now the bill sits in the Senate, where members of the majority caucus have scheduled yet another technical session for tomorrow. They're not even going to deal with it tomorrow. Well, they can't because they haven't passed it out of the finance. Friday is the end date of the special session. Senate majority consists largely of Democrats and a handful of Republicans who govern as a coalition. Among them are Senate President Gary Stevens, Majority Leader Kathy Giesel, Rules Chair Bill Wielechowski, and members Scott Kawasaki, Kelly Merrick, Matt Clayman, Forrest Dunbar, Jesse Bjorkman, Jesse Keel, Bert Stedman, and others. All right. They control Those people control whether the bill gets to the floor. They are the ones that are responsible. If your gas prices go up, if your electric prices go up and no pipeline is built, we're importing gas or importing LNG at higher prices, you can thank those people right there. Republican minority can do nothing about it. That's the beauty of the rule of 11. Nobody has to vote no. Nobody has to vote no. They're avoiding voting on the floor where they will be held accountable. They're locking arms and saying, as long as we don't agree to go out on the floor and address this bill, we all don't have to vote for it. Nobody has to explain themselves to constituents. Nobody has to appear in campaign ads opposing thousands of construction jobs, manufacturing opportunities, and a project capable of changing Alaska's economic trajectory. And the cost of your energy, your electric bill. Instead, they can simply hide behind a secret caucus vote that the public never sees. This is the same coalition that's lectured Alaskans about transparency, accountability, and open government. How's that coalition working for you, Alaska? They have demanded disclosure from everyone else while conducting some of their most consequential business behind closed doors. Now, when Alaska faces a decision that could shape its economic future for generations, transparency crowd has gone silent. Public won't know who supported moving the bill or who opposed it. The public won't know who in the majority killed it because that information remains locked away behind the caucus wall in the meeting. Special session called in advance to advance the gas line will end without accomplishing an essential purpose. This is why the rule of 11 exists, to avoid accountability, which is what Democrats do. It is manipulation. Let every senator explain his or her position and allow the public to see who supports the project and who opposes it. Let the chips fall where they may. That is how you and I provide effective oversight. Those legislators in that caucus, with their rule of 11, are preventing you from doing your due diligence and your oversight. And many of them are going to go to the elections and expect you, want you to vote for them so they can come back and do it again. If they don't pass the bill, they're going to come to you and make all sorts of lies about why it couldn't happen and the votes just weren't there and blah, 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 blah. And your costs are going up and they want to come back and do it again. This is a challenge we've got. Got one more meeting, one more series of conversations here that we need to hit. This is from this afternoon, towards the tail end of the afternoon meeting in Senate Finance.
I recognize this is a tough project financially, and it's a project of national interest and frankly international trade balances, and go on and on. Why the federal government has come around over a decade ago with loan guarantees and packages and tried to help push this project forward, and even till today, they're standing by. And so it is a concern that when we are asked to give a concession to help a financially challenged project, which this is, I think we all recognize that. So we're looking at changing our property tax structure to assist the cash flow. And then we look at the federal loan guarantee, and having a guarantee against default and a few things is pretty comforting for somebody that's going to put billions of dollars on the table for a project that's challenged. And then with the interest rate spread, whatever that is, if it's 50 basis points or 75 basis points or 100 basis points or whatever it is, it's a significant dollar amount. And and I recognize there might be some advantages in the right-hand column. It's not all one side, but we could be looking at, if it's an $18 billion project at 80-20 debt to equity, we could be looking at $80 million a year in additional debt service and $3.3 billion in added costs over the length of the project. That's $3.3 billion. And if you lower that rate,
Who's
a little
we?
bit, maybe you're down to, $2.5 billion. That's significant financial impact.
Who's we? It's not the state of Alaska. It's the project. Did I miss something here? Did I miss something here? Who's we? It's not the legislature. Glenfarne has already said the project is structured so that they don't need another dime from the state of Alaska.
On the project and who has to pay for it. So they may be cumbersome, and there is always political risk, but through multiple administrations, they have not pulled the loan guarantees from this project. It goes back a couple of 3 presidents. So that is a concern. I just want to put that on the table.
It's not a concern.
Mr. Chairman, that this is, I look at.
It's not a
that
valid
this is
concern.
Significant cost increase, yet we're being asked to give up a concession to decrease.
See, there's a cost increase in the project cost, and we're giving up a concession in the amount of revenue that we generate. There is no correlation. The state of Alaska is not paying for the project. There is no correlation to the cost of the project and the amount of revenue that you're generating, unless you're thinking about it in terms of property tax, which this is what they're asking. Get rid of the property tax. The resistance here is greed. Remember? Remember this? $29 billion is what we could get with property tax. But the project's asking us for doing something other than property tax. So if we do something other than property tax, if we go to the volumetric tax, we're only going to get 23 billion. We could get 29.7. We're only going to get 23.4. That's what he's talking about. If the cost of the project goes up and you're asking us to step off 29 billion and come to only 23 billion, well, we just can't do that. That's not fair. You know what happens when the cost of the project goes up? The 29 billion goes up. This number goes up because this is based on the value of the project. That's the cost of the project. So if you've got a cost overrun and the project goes higher, then your property tax goes higher and you get more revenue. So a financially sound project that has cost overruns and is able to weather those cost overruns under the current millage would mean more money to the state. It's a completely moot argument because it's never going to happen. The project is not going forward under the current law. So we're literally talking about the decision to modify our tax structure so the project has a chance of moving forward with investors and making $23.4 billion versus a wrong idea that you have a project that can generate $29.7 billion. You don't have that. But that's what Senator Stedman is saying. He's saying the cost of the project is getting greater, and yet we're reducing our take. It's a complete fallacy. It is not even logical correlation.
The cash flow, and I even contemplated and talked to a couple of my colleagues, and I don't think I got quite the support. I'd put a requirement that you have to go through the federal loan guarantee program for two reasons. One, I want the lower cost, and two is I want the federal oversight and the review of the project.
Why does Bert Stedman want lower cost? He's not paying it. The money's not coming out of his finance budget. Why the lower cost? The lower cost has nothing to do with the $16 or the $5 that we're going to be paying for gas. I take that back. If the project were to be less than it is now, the $16 could probably be less. No one is talking about that. That's not even a possibility. Matter of fact, we're only thinking that it's going to get more expensive. But if it gets more expensive, the $16 is still locked in. The only thing that we've heard as to how that $16 gets increased is through inflation. So you're talking 2.5%, something like that. That's it. That's all that the cost increase would happen through an inflation factor. And I don't even know what it is, whether it's a full historical inflation, 2.5%, or whether it's a portion of that. I don't know. The point is, there's no connection to the cost of gas to us and an increase in the cost of the project. Senator Stedman says he wants to see a less costly project. Yeah, so do I. So does Glenfarne. So do investors. Investors don't want to spend the money that they're looking at having to spend. They'd love to see a less costly project. Use the federal loan guarantees and get a less costly project. There's probably strings attached to that as to why you may or may not want to do that. All of that is irrelevant to Senator Stedman. He is not the project owner. This isn't his project. It's not Senate Finance's project. It is Glenfarne's project. The only thing Senator Stedman needs to concern himself with is what is the tax policy for the state of Alaska. The cost of the project is irrelevant. You want to make the cost relevant, then you keep a property tax. If you're going to keep a property tax, then the project doesn't move forward. You see, the arrows of the circular are leading to one inescapable truth. Current statute and this notion and concern about cost of project all points to tax reform. It's why they're requesting the tax reform, so that they can overcome the cost of the project hurdle and move this project forward. Eliminate the property tax, help reduce the cost, right, Senator Stedman? Reduce the cost by eliminating the property tax structure and going to a volumetric tax that helps reduce the cost. That's it. That's your focus. Telling Glenfarne how to manage the project is patronizing. It's none of your business. Who are you? You're just a state senator in the state of Alaska, one of 20. Who are you? Like, talk about irrelevant. Who are you?
Personally, that's my own personal opinion. It may slow it down a little bit.
It may halt it altogether. Your personal opinion. Who cares what your personal opinion is? I've got a personal opinion. You don't care what I think. You're a senator. And your objective here is to figure out what the correct state policy is for the tax of the pipeline. That's it. You are suffering from mission creep. You are have strayed outside of your lane.
And there may be strings attached. And one of those strings attached, as referenced earlier, was Davis-Bacon. I think there was a comment earlier possibly about wage scales and stuff. And
you want lower cost project, and now you're saying we need to go to Davis-Bacon? Hey, somebody help me make that make sense. We want lower cost, but we want you to go with Davis-Bacon wages. Good for contractors. Is that good for Alaskans who want low cost gas? Is that good for us? It just increases the cost of the project. Okay, fine. Go Davis-Bacon wages. Cost of the project goes forward. They got to finance more. Cost of the project goes up. Does it change the cost of the gas to us? Evidently not. Does it increase the risk that the investors will say no? Yes, it does. You keep pushing the cost of the project up, and this is where there's doublespeak from this man's mouth. We want to see the cost of the project go down, but his next words are going to be, we need you to be using Davis-Bacon wages. We need to take care of those union jobs.
Mr. Chairman, see the benefit in my district, which are island communities, when we have DOT road projects, we have, capital projects, sometimes small ones, $2 million projects.
Selfishness.
Having livable wages in the community makes a big difference. And this project is just on steroids. And when I think back of TAPS, when they built that, and the wages being paid and the workforce.
Watch this.
It gave opportunities for the workforce that they would have never had in their entire life if we didn't build that project. And they lived the benefits. So I've got those concerns, and the project labor agreements need to be put in here. We need to pay a man's livable wages for a day's work. I'm not interested in having this project built on right to work next to slave labor.
Next to slave labor. Okay. So he's looking down the table at Glenfarne, and he's saying, I'm not interested in having slave labor next to slave labor. The assumption is that because you're talking to a private corporation, that they're going to use next to slave labor. Who's going to come to Alaska and work for next to slave labor? Alaskans aren't going to work for next to slave labor, and you're not going to get people coming up here from lower 48 to work next to slave labor. Glenfarne's not going to hire people for next to slave labor. They're going to hire people for competitive wages. But this man is making a nonsense article. It's like a mountain out of a molehill. This is not an issue. It's nothing. It's a nothing burger. It is. It's amazing that we've got these people in charge. The disdain is dripping from his mouth as he's talking to Glenfarne. The patronizing language that he's using and the assumptions that he's making to Glenfarne is insulting. It is so far beneath that man's position. Why would industry want to come to Alaska and deal with this? Why would private industry, you got to really, really want it. The risk and reward, the reward has got to be massive for you to want to come to Alaska and sit in a committee meeting and be subject to this. Why do we not see more development in Alaska? Resource development, because you got to go through people like this. This is what's standing in the way of resource development. Economies don't grow because of this type of attitude towards private capitalist behavior. I don't know what you're thinking in the Panhandle, Sitka. Is the only thing that you can see is government handouts? Is that the only thing that you can see? I'm speaking to those Republicans down there. That's it. That's the extent of your vision, is to say, well, how much money can we get from the federal government and how much money can we get from the state government? Our economies are really suffering and we need more government money. Is that the extent of your thinking? I mean, there's got to be some capitalists there in Southeast Alaska who've got to speak up. This is absurd that this type of behavior is on display in our legislature. We have stooped so low that we don't even see it as abnormal anymore. This is not how you treat private enterprise if you value private enterprise engaging in business in your state.
Not interested in it. And if I could get the support to require that, forcing you guys to a loan guarantee, I'll do it. I think it's in the best interest of the state. Other than that, I think everything's pretty good.
Senator Sedman,
Smile,
through the chair.
patronizing.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for that tongue lashing.
In response, agree with you on the importance of this, of workers and having fair wages, and particularly prioritizing Alaska labor. Last week, we signed a comprehensive MOU with the building trades councils in Fairbanks and Anchorage, comprising over 15 different unions each, for major roles to deliver both phase 1 and phase 2 of the project. And so we're very proud of that commitment that the project has made. HB 381 also does include a requirement to have a PLA executed with the unions along the same.
Where are our union reps right now? Either Adam, president of Glenfarne, Alaska, is lying, or we've got unions that need to speak up right now. Because if there's an agreement out there that this project is going to fund union jobs, then those unions are the ones that stand to lose, because Senator Stedman is being Senator Stedman. Where are those unions? Where's your voice? You think you want to stand for the working man? You want to say that with credibility? Now's where you better exercise your muscle. You've got senators who don't want to see the project move forward for their own reasons. You union members had better step forward, raise your voice, and say this project is important and you better not stand in our way. We're not going to support you for re-election. These games in the Senate need to come to an end. People whose lives are at stake, their livelihoods are at stake, need to step forward and have some behind-the-scenes conversations with a few key senators and let them know where their priorities ought to be. Mr. Prestige just identified one group that has a lot at stake right now. Where else are you going to get a $50-some billion project going to be built in the state of Alaska with union? Where else are you going to get that? What other industries bringing that? Crickets, right? Because that's it. This is it. This is what you get for the next decade. Now, you build this pipeline and you've got low cost energy. Now you got more jobs. Now you got more opportunity. There are things that are going to happen that are possible to happen with low cost energy that are impossible to happen without it. This behavior in the Senate cannot be allowed to go forward. If it, in my opinion, if the Senate is successful in scuttling this project, the unions are behind it. They are supporting it because unions have the money, they have the ability, they have the voice, they have the power in the state of Alaska to exercise their muscle and to exercise their political opinion. I've seen it firsthand happen. If the unions are silent over the next few days, you know that they're complicit with scuttling this project. At least the union bosses. Because the rank and file stand to gain massively if this project goes forward. Union members, you better be asking your bosses, your union reps, the people who you think are leading you, what are you doing to convince the Senate in these last few days or even in the next special session to move this project forward? If it's radio silence from the unions, that's saying a lot. That is demonstrating that they don't care whether this project, whether Glenfarne moves forward with this project. That's what they're communicating. Their silence means they're okay with a project not moving forward.
Lines, and so that's a priority to us as well. Certainly what you lay out in terms of comparing these two options are very significant, important factors. I can tell you that what you see here on the slide, our job as a developer is to take decisions on how we can move the project forward the best way possible. And these are things that we've spent months and months. Everything that you articulated are things that we spent months thinking about and trying to come to the right decision on how to do this with the highest probability of success of delivering gas at an affordable cost to Alaskans. So I take that very seriously. One thing I do want to flag, in case it was not clear, are the ongoing costs beyond just the cost of capital, but the operational costs. And so, for example, it's not just the Davis-Bacon wage rates, which, again, I don't think are that significant of an additional cost considering our commitments to pay prevailing wages under our MOU with the labor unions. But one of the additional costs that is significant is the requirement to comply with the Cargo Preference Act. If we were to have federal financing funding this, that requires a majority of the inbound imports and materials to the project to be shipped on U.S. flagged carriers. And because of the limited availability of carriers that can actually handle the volume of what we need, that would present a very significant cost increase to the project. And so, again, it's a multi-factors that need to be considered. And at the end of the day, a decision why we are prioritizing going through private markets. But I certainly recognize each of the importance of each of the factors you identified.
Senator Stedman.
Yeah, well, we're not privy to the numbers of the increased costs for basically the Jones Act issue, I think you're referring to roughly.
Yeah. Senator Stedman has come to his high and mighty opinions, and he has not been part of the project development over the last year. He hasn't even been part of it over the last decade. He's had just a outside influence from a senatorial oversight perspective. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's sitting there in his high and mighty self, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. He thinks he does. He's got this big head and his big ego, but he doesn't actually know what he's talking about. He hasn't been in the room. He wasn't invited to the table. He hasn't been part of the discussion. He doesn't know. This is a case in point. The project developer is going to push back and point out, Senator Stebbins, you don't know what you're talking about. We can't go that route because it increased the costs. Now Senator Stebbins like, I wasn't privy to that information. Okay, shut up. Just be quiet. Do your job and focus on making this project feasible by modifying the tax structure. And that's your job. That's it. Just get that done in the next 24, 48 hours, and then you can go home.
So it makes it kind of hard to respond.
Yeah, I'd say,
But I know
you don't
the
have the
federal government's
information.
very interested in this. And when we go off to our energy meetings, the subject comes up with the, with the Department of Energy when their folks come in and talk to us. This including the at the cabinet level of the president. They want the project. They've got Department of Energy has hundreds of billions of dollars sitting there looking to go to work, which is kind of surprising when they stand up and put out numbers like that. And we've got a project sitting here that could absorb tens of billions.
Oh, really? So we'd like to see the federal government give us more money to reduce the cost of the project.
So to me, it's disappointing, that we don't secure that.
Who cares whether Senator Steadman is disappointed? Pass a tax revision so the project can move forward, and you can go into your retirement disappointed over it. I care less whether you're disappointed or not. I know that my energy bill is not going to care whether you're disappointed or not. I want to pay less for my electric and gas utilities. I want my neighbors to pay less in electric, and I don't care whether you're disappointed or not. This is ridiculous. Your disappointment's not my concern.
And I think it's expensive not to do it.
Thank you, Senator Steadman. Further questions by finance members on slide deck number 4? See none, we'll move on to number 5.
Thank you, Chair Hoffman. With your indulgence, this next slide is just a bit of a recap and putting into writing for the record the commitments from Glenfarne on this project. Again, to undertake the development at our own risk and expense, all of the activities of the project, the personnel, the engineers, the legal work that goes into it is being done at Glenfarne's expense and risk. There is not a reimbursement mechanism for the for Glenfarne if the project fails or if we abandon the project. There is no backstop that we can call upon. The state's not put anything at risk at this point that would have to be paid to Glenfarne. And again, as I mentioned, we actually turned down a reimbursement offer that had been presented to us by Ada when we were coming into starting the project. And so those are core principles. Those are core principles of Glenfarne in undertaking this project. And again, we're doing so on the basis of our commitment to undertaking this project, our confidence that we can find ways to make it work. If we work together, if we work with the legislature, if we work with our partners, if we work with the utilities, we can figure out how to make this project work. And that commitment and that developers, if you will, that ingenuity that we've brought to the project has resulted in bringing this project further along in its development timeline than ever before in its history. And so that is something that we've accomplished in a little bit over a year of actual ownership. And I think it speaks volumes to not only our emotional and financial commitment, but also our capability to actually deliver this project. And the proof is in the results and the things that we've delivered in that short period of time. And so just a bit of a reiteration of some of what we discussed earlier.
He left out the fact that one of his statements should have been, if you can just have value, if you can just see value in private enterprise, then we can work together to make this happen. We're seeing, it's being demonstrated by Senator Stedman and others that they do not value private enterprise. They do not value somebody coming in and bringing their own money and their own risk, right? Advancing this project. Glenfarne is advancing this project at their own risk and expense. And the Senate is like, I think you need to take federal dollars. You need to take federal dollars. You need to pay Davis-Bacon wages. We can't take the federal dollars because then we bump up against the Jones Act. Oh, well, I didn't know that. The private business does. If you valued the effort and the expertise of the private business, then you default to the assumption that those are professionals and they know what they're doing. Ask questions to verify whether they know what they're doing. You don't default to the exact opposite, which is you don't know what you're doing because you're not Senate Finance. Like, you would value them. This whole thing, this charade is just showing that you don't value private enterprise in Alaska. That's it. In a nutshell. The only thing you value is federal dollars, government money, free investment money. That's it. Creating wealth, actually producing something, you don't value that.
This morning.
Questions on slide number 5? Senator Stedman.
Just for added background on the 50 million request, I think the administration had put that on the table here a year or so ago, and there was resistance on that appropriation. And then there was discussion that those funds then could be attained through ADA. And we had that dialogue, and it was, I think, correctly concluded not to pursue that avenue just because of the political concern with that, and we went on to where we are today. So there's a little bit more in the background I thought the public should know about the $50 million request.
Thank you, Senator Stedman. Further questions?
Well, the public
on
knows a
slide
lot.
Deck number 5.
Public knows a lot more today.
The next slide is a short summary. There was a question in the prior session regarding Glenfarne's ability to transfer its interest in 8 Star. What we have in our agreement is what I refer to as a traditional lockup period that restricts Glenfarne and prevents Glenfarne from transferring its interests. That lockup period, that transfer restriction exists for a defined period of time that runs until the earlier of either 10 years after the effective date of the contract, which was March of last year, or the later of 1 year after achieving the commercial operations date on the pipeline, or achieving FID on both the LNG facility and the gas treatment facility. And so you've got the principle here is making sure that Glenfarne does not and will not transfer its interest until we've delivered meaningful accomplishment on the project, actually delivered the project past its, if you will, kind of its risk point. And so that's the concept of this lockup period. I don't know if you want to add anything to that. Ms. Kissinger was on the other side of kind of working through this structure.
Questions on slide deck number 6? Senator Stedman.
Just if the effective date, I missed that if you mentioned it. on bullet 111 there where it says 10 years? What is the effective date?
Yeah, Senator Sedman, apologies for the shorthand. The effective date would be March 28th, 2025.
Okay. And then, just so I'm clear, because we're in the process of writing this statute, right? We're working on this bill. And so we need to understand some of this stuff, even though it may not be even relevant to what we're putting in the bill. We need to understand it. So this includes, if you wanted to sell out of 8-Star as of gold and the subsidiary, the 3 subsidiary units. So if you hit the 1 year after pipeline phase 1, which is our in-state gas line, after that hits commercial operation, 1 year later, you can liquidate, if you so choose, your position in 8-Stars of gold and the other entities.
Senator Sedman, yes, that's correct, the way this is structured. And so that's a period that would be achieved. We would have to obviously FID the pipeline, construct the pipeline, put it into operations for a year, and at that time, we would have that option.
Right. And if I could,
Senator Stedman.
and then at the same timing sequence, if it had final investment decision is what we're talking about in the statute, there's some time elements. Final investment decision on the whole enchilada achieved with both the LNG facility and the gas treatment plant. So that basically the entire project would be under FID. Then you're free to market your position in any of the sub-entities or 8-Star of gold, correct?
Senator Sedman, that's correct. What I will say, just to reiterate to the committee, Glenfarne currently owns and operates over 60 infrastructure assets. We're not in the business of selling out of them over a short period of time. We don't have a fund or public money that requires us to exit investments. And so we intend to be in the projects that we own, including this, for the lifetime of the project. But I will say that these are highly standard provisions that you would have in a joint venture agreement like this. And so our joint venture agreement does include this.
Senator Stedman.
And if I could, let's go over the dilution of 8-Star. Because I asked a question earlier today and you wanted to think about it or get a lifeline or clarify the position. So my understanding is that AGDC has an undiluted 25% interest in 8-Star. For those watching at home, that's the holding company that'll hold the gas line, the liquefaction plant and the treatment plant. Your 75% interest in 8-Star. Walk me through how you could sell out of that or have that voluntarily or squeezed out, diluted your position.
Senator Sedman, through the chair, it's fixed, just like the AGDC 25% is fixed. So that's the only way out of that would be under this as permitted under these transfer restrictions on this slide.
Okay, so there was earlier confusion. So you people or an investor would not come into 8-Star Gold with an option then to invest in either the pipeline, the treatment plant, or the liquefaction plant. Let's clarify that old issue up.
Senator Sedman, that's correct. That's correct. Any investors that wanted to come in to fund the construction of the projects would come in at the project level, and so the ownership split at the holdco 8-Star holding company level would remain 25-75 between AGDC and Glenfarne, and the equity issuance and the additional investors would come in at the lower asset level.
Okay.
Senator Stedman.
No, I think that clears it up. I think there was some confusion on the potential of you guys selling a portion of the 75% holding of 8-Star and diluting that, and then who would be our partners in the holding company if you changed to whoever, sold out to part or all of your interest to somebody else.
Sure, Senator Sedman, I understand that concern through the chair, and that's recognizing that concern to the state to be able to know who its partner is. That's why this is structured the way it is.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Stedman. Senator Keel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So then, little clarity on as we move down the structure into the LLCs. I just assume, you're welcome to correct me if I'm wrong, that you will seek some level of equity carry, if possible, as the dilution happens with more equity investors. You'll seek to hang on to some slice of that. Can that dilution happen differently between AGDC and Glenfarne, or are we tied at the proportion of any carry?
Senator Keel, through the chair, we're tied at that portion doesn't change. You're right. We want to hold on to a carried interest. We can't guarantee what that will be because it will be the outcome of a lot of things and a lot of negotiations with financing sources. But we want to maintain as much of that as we possibly can, and the split of that will remain 75-25% to the state.
Senator Keel.
Thank you. That's helpful to know.
Thank you, Senator Keel. Further questions of Senate Finance members on slide deck number 6? Slide deck number 7.
Slide 7 is my last slide to present today. And again, it's a follow-up from some of the earlier discussion this morning about what are Glenfarne's obligations. I've talked about how we are willing to undertake this at our own risk and expense. What does that mean? What are we undertaking? What are we committed to do? At all times, we are a partner in this project. We're committed to use diligent development efforts to progress the project to FID and to execution and completion. What that means at a very basic level is we are obligated to not sit and do nothing. And so if we were to stop working on the project, we'd be in violation of our agreement to use these efforts. They're efforts based, and so just to reiterate what's here on the screen, we are obligated to maintain active and prudent development, which is continuing to pursue project objectives under industry standards. Again, it should go, well, it doesn't go without saying, but I will say it because it's very important. Our highest priority is to deliver this project safely. And so applying safety standards and prudent industry standards at all times is critical to us. Committing the investment of capital, time, personnel, and effort to advance towards FID. Continuing to progress commercial and technical progress, the execution of agreements, the engineering studies. As I've mentioned earlier, we conducted the front-end engineering and design study that was completed in December at our own cost, conducted by a Worley engineering firm that resulted in I'd say a highly reliable Class 2 cost estimate on the project. Governance and compliance. Obviously, we're committed to adhering to all of our contractual obligations. And then very importantly, I'd ask Mr. Kissinger to comment a bit on transparency because a core part of our obligation here is on the way that we interact with AGDC, the way that we maintain a formal dialogue and information flow and provide AGDC the oversight as a partner to make sure this project is being done and being done in the right way. So I'll turn to Mr. Kissinger just to outline what those mechanics look like.
Yeah, this is Matt Kissinger for the record. With respect to the transparency and just the relationship in general between AGDC and Glenfarne, we have these requirements. So we have the monthly report. We also have the monthly development consultation committee, which I sit on, as well as my colleague Brad Chastain from AGDC. And that's where we go through the details of all the elements of the project, from the technical aspects to the commercial and agreement aspects of it. Further, we have the board. I think it's been established earlier, but I'll say it again. The board is really more of an oversight function where AGDC actually gets its core powers in the agreement is through AGDC approval rights on specific items that we've talked about. So AGDC has kind of, carte blanche veto rights on certain things, such as any contracts, key contracts that do not comply with the Alaska Advantage principles. And I think I've laid out those Alaska Advantage principles before, but it is, using Alaskans for the project, having an Alaskan business, building it as an Alaskan business, delivering gas to Alaskans, 500 million standard cubic feet reserved, expanding the project should we grow beyond that, using differential rates, but only where they achieve the lowest possible utility rate. And that was crafted very carefully, not to say a lower utility rate, but the lowest possible utility rate. In addition to all that, though, and this is really important, is we've built a relationship built on trust over the last couple of years as we moved through the negotiation of the agreements and then on towards executing these agreements and operationalizing them. So there's a vast amount of information and project information and consultation that is done beyond those requirements. And this is one of the things that we really wanted to safeguard in this process. We want to be able to walk that fine line between oversight of Glenfarne and being a true partner and contributor with Glenfarne. And I think that we have achieved that.
I would say you don't have any trust of the legislature, for sure.
Richards.
Mr. Chairman, again, Frank Richards for the record. As AGDC's president, as Matt described, I sit on the board of 8-Star Alaska, and I take that role as the state's representative to look at the efforts that Glenfarne is doing in compliance with these diligent development efforts. And so that is key to us to make sure that as a developer, they are moving this project forward. They're meeting these requirements and reporting to us so that we have the ability to make those decisions on whether or not they're achieving these development efforts. And as Senator Kaufman has talked about previously, you know, looking at a dashboard. This is our dashboard that we measure the progress and the efforts that Glenfarne is doing to be able to assure ourselves as the state's representatives that this project is continuing to advance and move forward in the timelines and as well as within the goals that we have set forward from our Alaskan Advantage principles to the lowest price cost to Alaskans.
Senator Stedman.
Just a couple quick things. I think you'd mentioned that you're at class 2, but I think on your cost review, but class 2, isn't that just the pipe? And you're at a different class on the liquefaction plant and the conditioning plant?
Senator Stedman, through the chair, that's absolutely correct. And so there's a class 2 estimate completed on the pipeline in December. We're relying on more historical class 3 and class 4 estimates on the LNG facility and the gas treatment facility.
And for those at home, what is a class 2?
The class 2.
All right, we've already talked about this. All right, I think we've got enough to get a flavor tonight. I hope in the next couple of days to hear something from state unions that stand to gain from this project. There needs to be some messaging to the legislature that says, hey, we need some serious action taken to get this bill moving forward. I think that's necessary. The message needs to be sent to the legislature that this project needs to go forward. Now, I suspect that there's going to be a tune change. You're going to see a little bit of a tweak of your messaging after Thursday. Can we get it done in one day? Probably not. So we'll come in. Another special session is just another week, right? They can call themselves into a special session. The governor can call them into a second special session, right? They can come back Monday. They can come back on Saturday with a second special session. Fix what they need to fix and pass the bill. Governor's vetoes have already happened or didn't happen. All their bills get signed into law or are allowed to go into law. Now we can move on. I suspect that the messaging changes after that happens, right? It is ugly. It is not the way that it should be, but it is the way that it is. Even if that's the issue, even if the governor's vetoes is the issue, we still need to hear from Alaskans who want to see a project move forward. It needs to be crystal clear to these elected representatives, and I'm talking senators and representatives, the legislature, It needs to be clear to them that Alaskans are counting on them to remove all possible obstacles for this company to be successful at building a pipeline. You want to lead unions? Now's your chance to lead. Speak like your jobs depend on it, because they do. That's what I got tonight. Let me check with you. I know there are a ton of messages here. You're welcome, Lynn. Appreciate your support. I get a couple. I've got time for one or two questions, and I'll see if I can find any. If there's Craig says that the unions have made many statements in support of the project. Interesting. Okay, then they have not risen to my level of awareness here in the corners of backwoods Nikiski. Not a lot of union folks around here. Certainly not messaging. I will have to look for that. Thanks, Craig, for pointing that out. I think my comments still stand on a very public, on a very strategic level. Now, a message is necessary. Whether they've been sending them or not, now a message is necessary, I think. Yeah. I think Glenn Farnett does have agreements, and the rest stands as is. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions. Okay, check the most recent. Yeah, I get that the billboards are out there, and they had a rally out here today in Soldotna with this. I'm not sure whether that was union driven or where that was coming from, but yeah, there is activity. I know that's all public. What I'm trying to articulate is there's the political class, for lack of a better word, lack of a better description. There are the political movers and shakers. Okay, the people who are engaged, who know what's going on. When a senator picks up their phone, there's certain numbers that come up quite often, right? Those people. If this was a defined benefits conversation, those people would be there, right? This is a union contract. Those people are there on the phone, right? Those conversations need to happen again. Do not take it for granted. Those movers and shakers need to have a conversation here that your livelihoods depend on this. Now, here's the other problem. The rank and file may think that that's what's happening, but their leaders may not be doing it. I don't know. Trust but verify, right? So if you're rank and file union, and I'm talking private sector union right now, you're the tradespeople. You need to be getting in touch with your union rep, whoever is messaging the legislature, whoever's responsible for that. You need to check in with them. Hey, are you communicating? Now is the time to be making sure that we communicate with the legislature that we want to see this happen. It's those types of conversations that are really, really necessary. I didn't say there needed to be billboards. People in Juneau don't see billboards in Kenai. They don't. You have an event that happens and there's lots of people show up. There's a photograph that gets taken, and then that photograph gets sent off to the legislator. Look how many people are showing up. Your community really wants you to see this happen, right? It's the behind the scene conversations, the influence that needs to happen. That's what I'm talking about. All right. I hope this was helpful. We'll see what tomorrow brings. It's not going to bring us a legislative floor session for the Senate that'll be helpful. We'll see what Senate Finance does. Hopefully, I guess nothing's happening until the governor does what he's going to do with vetoes. That's the point. That's what I understood. So second special session it is then, or Friday and Saturday. I don't know. Anyway, we'll catch you tomorrow, and we'll update you on what's happened. Have a good night, and we'll see you later.